Welcome to the CareerLab Podcast with your hosts, America's career counselor, Julie LaCroix and Joel Siegel.
We're coming back, and as we've been doing lately on CareerLab, we're not only having young and mid-sized and older professionals whom you and I are helping develop and recharge, re-energize, and revitalize their careers, but also we're having guests on who have a lot of specific expertise and something to offer about career development, career progression, and career transition that can be really useful to our whole audience. And I'm really having fun with these guests.
Absolutely. We want to show success stories and then outline the architecture of those success stories so people can see how careers can unfold progressively yet successfully.
And I know that feedback we've gotten from our audience that you love these segments, so we're going to continue them. Today, we're going to meet with a colleague of Julie's and mine, and who has kind of an unusual career arc and has done well. And so we're going to chat with him a little bit. And why don't we go ahead and reach out to him?
This is Vance.
Hey, Vance. Good morning. It's Joel Siegel, and you're on CareerLab. How are you?
I am very well, Joel. Thank you very much. How are you today?
I'm doing okay, and it's great to hear your voice. So you're on CareerLab with myself and America's career counselor, Julie LaCroix. So why don't you guys just say hi to each other?
Hi, Vance.
Hello, Julie. Pleasure to hear your voice and to meet you over the phone. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Vance. We're so excited to have you on our show. Your story is so interesting and fun, and it's really the type of model that we like to show our listeners from time to time about people who can pursue interests vigorously and turn careers into them and make enormous shifts and swings and turns and still be successful and fulfilled along the way. So we're really excited for you to illuminate your path for us today. Thank you for being on our show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
A lot of our guests on the show are actually callers who are in the middle of career challenges, and Julie and I help them examine and revitalize and solve those challenges. And then we have guests from a different kind of perspective, and you're one of those. These are people who have something really to offer the large body of listeners who subscribe to CareerLab and listen to it all the time. And I thought, knowing you as I do as a colleague, you'd be a great guest to have on the show. So what we'd kind of like to do is talk a little bit about how you were just born as a financial analyst? No, you have quite a story about how you got there you were suddenly born as a full-fledged, complex, unique financial planner. No, I don't think so. I think you've had some interesting developments along the way. And so one of the things we'd like you to do is kind of illuminate the path for us. I mean, you don't have to tell us the whole story. You can break in at any one point, but we'd like to hear how you kind of got to where you are. Maybe what you could do, tell us real briefly what you do right now, and then kind of a little bit about what happened to get you there. Could you do that?
Absolutely. So I am a comprehensive financial planner who spent roughly a decade traveling the country full-time, serving as an investment consultant to leading private wealth and retail financial advisors. So before I became a financial planner, I consulted financial advisors and financial planners at wirehouses such as Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, UBS, RIAs, which are registered investment advisors or independent financial planning firms, family offices, and of course, last but certainly not least, independent broker dealers. And in that time, I learned a great bit of information about what financial advisors do, and very specifically what many of them don't do, and the planning gaps that exist that can be filled. So after roughly 10 years in that role, I had some life events that presented themselves. And as both of you know, life is ultimately what happens to us as we are trying to implement our plans. And while I was implementing mine, some things came up that changed my trajectory and frequency, and also my role in the, in the overall industry.
Well, yeah, that's very interesting and well said. So we know now that you didn't just pop out of high school and become who you are at this point. And when you were working earlier on in the financial services industry, and then you had some life events, can you that's kind of the thing which has helped alter your career arc and kind of make you more of whom you are today, and perhaps, Vance, make you more multidimensional. Can you talk a little bit about some of that?
Sure. And I'll actually start with the genesis of me getting into the financial services industry.
Good.
So as a resident of San Diego, I, at the age of 26, was attending a dinner event in La Jolla, and I happened to notice this this sequence of young gentlemen driving these very flashy cars pull up to a restaurant called Cafe Japango in La Jolla. And these were six-figure dollar cars, and they all came into this restaurant. And I've never met a stranger, Joel, as you know. So I simply walked up to them and I asked, "What is it that all of you do?" And they go,
Market
"Well,
research.
of course, right? You always have to conduct due diligence in every aspect of life." So they go, "Oh, well, we're loan originators." "Oh, well, help me understand what you mean by that." "Well, don't you own a home?" I go, "I'm 26 years old. I have $15,000 to my name." "No, I don't own a home." And they all laughed and they said, "Well, hey, dude, we can get you into a house for less than what you're paying in rent, and you build equity." And I go, "What's the catch?" And they go, "There is no catch." And I go, "Well, if you're telling me that I get to own a home at an outright cost that is less than renting, there's got to be something." They go, "Well, look, in 3, 5, or 7 years, your mortgage will reset to prime rate." And I said, "Well, prime rate, gentlemen, is at about 6%. So that's a 600% jump in cost." And they said, "No problem. You can just turn around and sell it." And a light bulb went off. And I said, "How many of these are you doing?" And they go, "This is all we do."
Oh my gosh.
And I thought, well, this is a problem, not only because there will potentially be downward pressure on the real estate market, but the banking system repackages loans and loan pools. And that moment in time is what drove my interest into getting into the institutional investing business. And there was a firm also based in La Jolla, which had a platform of what are called alternative investments, which are not for everyone. I need to point that out.
Right.
But there are certain investments historically that have weathered economic storms. And I approached the founders of that company, and they said, "There's no way we're going to take you. You have no MBA, no sales experience. You have this degree in neuroscience. You're some nerd from Maryland. No deal." I said, "I'm not going to leave you alone until you give me a job, because I think we might have an economic event that is brewing. And I think that this would be a good place for me to work and bring value." And 9 months later to the day, I was hired. And then 2008 happened, and we know the rest of that story. So I was able to get a job at this company that, by pure luck, had a platform of investment strategies that did really well in 2008 because of how they trade. And again, they aren't for everyone. And any listeners that want to look this up, I strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified financial planner before you invest in any type of investment, not just the ones to which I'm referring.
Thank you, Vance.
But nonetheless, of course, and I have to say that,
Of
and
course.
I'm sure listeners understand. But nonetheless, in that role, I would travel around the country and meet with financial advisors to specifically consult them on how to deploy these types of investment strategies into the portfolios for their millionaire next door and ultra high net worth clients. And in that process, I learned how they serve clients, the strategies they employ, the financial planning and estate planning and tax alleviation strategies that many of them don't employ. And in that role, as a quote unquote industry insider, I was able to glean insight into the inner workings of financial institutions and their advisors. And that was never my intention. That was a sort of byproduct, if you will, of the experience to go in and consult them on how to use investment strategies and how to invest their clients' money in an overall fashion. And then the life events happened. So I had been here in San Diego. I moved.
Are you going to talk about those life events?
Oh, I am, absolutely, with your permission.
Please do. That's what we want to hear about.
Okay. So I moved to Florida pursuing happiness in the form of currency. And having grown up with financial fear or fear of financial insecurity, if you will.
Why did you grow up with fear of financial insecurity?
So I grew up in rural Maryland, and the neo-local family in which I grew up, that was just a dominant theme. We lived out in the country. I don't come from, the moneyed or well-heeled polo pony riding type.
Well, you certainly didn't have a hard time walking up to the guys in the Porsches, though, in La Jolla.
I did not, but I think that growing up in farm country and never having met a stranger there, that carried into my personal and professional aspects of life, and actually has served me well.
It's grit. That's American grit.
So I moved to Florida, and a really unique, highly unusual opportunity presented itself. There's a pretty well-known money manager that was a neighbor in Tampa, and I won't mention names on the call.
Right. Florida has a lot of alternatives, though.
Yeah, they do. And this was a money manager who had actually built a long-term career and well-respected reputation, and had moved to Florida to join forces with another money manager. And it was, from all aspects, the opportunity of a lifetime, because I was able to join as a partner right off the bat. It was an employee-owned firm. And I thought that I was at the apogee of institutional investments at age 34 in Tampa, Florida, which is a beautiful town. And I just thought that I was going to do that for a few years and maybe buy a hotel in Belize and check out, and no one would ever see me again.
Oh, how fun. Oh, how
Sounds
fun.
perfect.
It does, doesn't it? It's just, and then that whole thing called life happened. And that thing was the following. In an 18-month period, I had not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 family members die.
Oh, dear.
Four of whom were very close. My grandmother had a massive stroke, which left her bedridden for the remaining months of her life.
And you were close with her, weren't you?
Yeah, very, very. Yeah. I was really close with, I grew up with 3 grandparents. I had the grandparents on my mother's side and the grandfather on my dad's side. And also my Aunt Val on my mom's side. I'm just trying to determine the extent to which I should give full detail and clarity. But nonetheless, I had these family members.
It's a point that your relationship building skills started in your family, and that's why you've been so able to build trusting relationships in a difficult industry, institutional asset management, and navigate that well.
So
yeah, and I clarify that I was very close with my grandparents, because for many people, grandparents are the people that bring them a T-shirt from Mexico, right? But my grandparents and I we were very close. I spoke with them every other day. These are my grandparents on my mom's side and the grandfather on my dad's side. We just had a close relationship. They treated me as a peer, and they provided me with insight into their successes and their mistakes, and we just had a great relationship. So when
excuse me for interrupting. So when these massive illnesses happened and the life events happened, what happened to you? I know that your career took quite of an arc. I know that something happened with bikes, and you want to go into and tell us a little bit about what happened then?
Yeah, sure. So my grandmother, the 4 family members transitioned to the spiritual side. My grandmother had this stroke. One of the family members that died was my Aunt Val. She had this 6-year battle with what originally started as breast cancer. And my biological father, whom I had never met but spoken with a couple times on the phone, had died, and I never had the opportunity to meet him in person. We did have a couple meetings scheduled. He didn't show. So I can't say that we didn't have any relationship, but we really had no relationship of substance. We may have had, 5 or 6 telephone calls and a handful of emails, but I had never met him in person, and we were certainly not close. So when these people started to transition, and in particular, after eulogizing 3 of my closest family members, there was this feeling of finality that set in. There was this feeling that time is finite on this planet. And there was also some guilt because I thought, here I am traveling around the country doing what I think is expected of me, which is the pursuit of happiness in the form of currency vis-a-vis a career that I thought was the end all be all. And before I was really able to settle into that new role at that company in Florida, I got the news that my grandmother had this massive stroke. And given that 4 other family members had died in the preceding 18 months, I thought, you know what? Her husband recently died. Her youngest daughter recently died. I need to go be with grandma. So I resigned from my career and went to West Virginia to be of service to my grandmother. I stayed in her house, which was just a bizarre experience. I'm in this house with pictures of family members.
T-shirts from Mexico all over the place. Vance, can I just jump in real quick here for the listeners?
Sure.
What Vance is describing is actually a very common role shift that we have to go through in life. If you are a female and you get married and you have children, all of a sudden your primary role can move from career. First you're a student as a primary role, your child is a primary role, then a student, then a wife, then a mother. You still have those other roles, but your primary and secondary and tertiary, the prioritization of those roles shift. And that's exactly what happened with Vance, is his primary role was worker, and all of the sudden family events caused him to deprioritize the role of worker and amplify his role as a member in his family and take a leadership role there. So those are difficult situations, Vance, that we get faced with, and it sounds like you went through this. So please continue.
I did, and it was a very challenging time. In fact, it was the most challenging time that I have had in my 40 years on the face of this planet. I don't miss that time, but the thing that I value most is the clarity and purpose that I was able to ascertain and really build as a foundation for myself moving forward. And as Joel mentioned, there was a motorcycle involved. So when I got up to Morgantown, West Virginia, of all places, which is where my grandmother was from, I was able to identify the location where my biological father was living. I met his widow. I met his friends. She very ceremoniously, along with his friends, gave me his Harley-Davidson. And what's kind of interesting, this whole nature versus nurture argument, is I had been riding Harleys for many years. In fact, I started riding when I was 16, when I got my driver's license. And by the way, for listeners, I no longer ride them because I now have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old.
Another example of where another role, father, has taken priority.
Yeah, and you're right. It's just it's a very unforgiving sport.
Yeah.
So I go and I remember meeting his widow and his friends, and I went to his gravestone, and much of the unanswered questions that I had up until that point in life were ultimately answered, and I was able to get closure. I also had a half sister named Sybil, whom I had never met, and we built a relationship. She coincidentally was living about 45 minutes outside of where my grandma was living. And all these things happened that I always wanted to happen, just maybe not under that circumstance. So ultimately, when my grandmother died, I decided that I was going to hop on the Harley-Davidson that originally belonged to my biological father. I rode for months and months around the country, and I grew a great big beard and really long hair, which, by the way, was to ultimately cut and donate in honor of my Aunt Val, who had died of breast cancer.
I love how you string meaning into all of your pursuits.
I just set out on the open road. I had no responsibility, no accountability, and really no agenda other than to, looking back, ultimately heal.
Did you know you were set when you set out? Did you know that this journey was about healing, or did you just think you were hitting the road?
I just thought I was hitting the road to
Right.
kind of clear my head and check
Right.
out and live the dream. Because
Did you know did you know what a radical decision that was? Did you perceive this is a really radical thing I'm doing, growing this giant beard, riding around the country on a Harley, changing my body? I mean, did you get that, or did you just experience it and then later on were able to understand?
Oh no, I totally knew that it was all about the journey, and there were a lot of things that I wanted to figure out on that.
So you felt like at
particular
some
journey.
level that part of what you were doing was to figure out stuff, whether it was stuff about your family, stuff about your past, stuff about where you were going, and you allowed yourself the opportunity to have this break in life in which your constant stream of clearly very different financial, occupational stuff stopped, and you gave yourself this chance, right?
Sabbatical. They're very common and healthy.
Yeah, and it really was a sabbatical. And I just thought back to the thousands of hours that I have spent with financial advisors. And the meetings seem to just be so routine, and people are so regimented, and they're so just check the box. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I realized that I had this highly unusual opportunity to take my life bucket, turn it upside down, and then decide what, and very specifically who I wanted to put back in and how I wanted to spend the balance of my time. And it really led me to a philosophical viewpoint on life. And I knew that when I was on this cross-country journey, which I wasn't sure how long it would take, but I was going to allow myself the necessary amount of time. And as with all things in life, much would be revealed, and things always end up working themselves out. And it was on that journey that I had a lot of what I call windshield time to think about the financial services industry, and in an ideal world, what I would want to change about it. And what I finally accepted is that I can't change the industry as a whole, but I can do my absolute best to change the lives of those that I serve. And I can serve as an educational platform in giving various financial media outlets information, sound bites, quotes, interviews, etc., on things that can be provided to the public, so that at least the education and the knowledge is out there. And so when this journey ended.
Wait, before the journey ended, Vance, let me jump in. So during the journey, did you also have the chance, obviously you must have, to try to get some resolution about the emotional things that have gone on in your life, your broken relationship with your dad and other things you talked about? Obviously that was probably a part of the healing, was what took place on that journey?
Without question.
Yeah, because I think for many of our listeners, that's a key thing. Julie, I think you used the word sabbatical, which was a beautiful word, but it was really more than a sabbatical. It was a chance to really reformulate and resolve many of the things that you'd gone through emotionally, which many of us never really get to that point where we can do that and do it in such a, frankly, radical way that you did it. And so that's pretty significant in itself. When you were on the road during that time, even though you talk later on about reformulating your view of the financial services industry and how it's affected you in your current professional role, did you ever think that you might never come back? Or did you know where you were going to end up? Or did you think, that you would never come back to financial services, or really any kind of services? What was that like?
That's a great question. Yes, I did think about never coming back to the financial services world. I thought about a lot of things in many different ways, and that was one of the most salient aspects of that period of riding around the country. I mean, it was just such a journey, and it allowed me the freedom and the independence to think about what truly matters most to me, which is not material in nature. And I really need to differentiate that. It's not, what do I do for a living? What's the house that I live in? What's my net worth? It's much more allegorical or nebulous or meaningful and spiritual. It's much deeper than those material things, if that makes any sense at any level to anyone.
It does to me. Can I put in career language for you, because you went through a transition philosophically, and that affected the restructuring of how you of your criteria for career decision making. So do you mind if I just take a moment and
please do
show the audience what happened there? So early in your career, you came out of the gates, you wanted to make money. We make decisions in career based on one of three things: values, what's important to us, skills, what we're good at, or interests, which is what we're interested in, passions, what pursuits, those types of things. And when we're young, we tend to look for our passions and they're not developed yet, or we jump to stability or money, and so we make wrong decisions. We don't make decisions based on skills. Skills pursuit is what the younger people should be always considering as the primary mechanism for career decision making. Yours was good, but faulty technically, but in my opinion, but that's okay. You did well. You chose money. And so when you came to a point in your life where you took your sabbatical and were looking for what really mattered to you, it was time for you to do the very bold thing, Vance, of shedding that value system, which had been the driver of your career decision making, and really reach inside for what did matter to you. And it sounds like teaching others and connecting with others through sales was important, but connecting with others through their own personal or professional development is now what you want to move forward with. So making an anchor move by making skills become your primary decision-making criteria for career mobility, that's what happened there, is you shifted your value system and let your skills lead. That's what I'm hearing.
So
that is precisely what happened.
And so as the journey continued, you were sharing that you want to wind us now to the place of how you kind of came out of that and ended up. I know you, so I know you're married. I know you have 2 children, and you want to kind of wrap up that journey for us a little bit.
Yeah. So I ended up coming here through San Diego and walked into a restaurant where I had a friend who was working there, and she introduced me to my wife. And within minutes, we looked at each other and said, we just fell in love. We're going to get married and we're going to have 2 kids. And all of those things have happened. And we just knew, and it sounds kind of fairy tale like, and, I get that, but it's really what happened. And so I went back to the East Coast, got my things, moved back out here. And I just started reflecting on the knowledge set that I have about the financial services industry and what I really want to do. And I realized that in having these family members transition to the spiritual side, particularly my grandmother and aspects of the handling of her estate, those 2 things paired together, meaning the personal experiences with family members and the, upwards of a decade that I spent consulting financial advisors, I could combine those 2 to bring value to families that I serve. So I had never, I wasn't sitting in a hotel somewhere in Atlanta or Los Angeles and I woke up and went, aha, I really want to be a financial advisor or a financial planner. It was a more extensive, kind of more deeply thought process, the conclusion of which was, this is really what I want to do, which is ultimately in a service-based role. And for the record, it's much more fulfilling than living out of a suitcase and traveling the country full time.
Sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, part of the reason I wanted you to be on the show, Vance, was because your story is kind of remarkable in that way. First of all,
an emergence.
Yeah. Well, also being in the financial services industry, you wouldn't expect your change to have occurred in the way that it did. What you've just told us, what you went through, and yet coming back and being able to regroup yourself, find a family, build your own family, put to rest the traumas of the past, become a different kind of financial planner, one who services the needs of your clients in a way that's different than, obviously, you just talked about living out of a suitcase. It's kind of a unique story, and I wanted our listeners to hear it because I think for many of our listeners, they would like to take a sabbatical. They would like to think these things through, but they never really hear about anybody really doing it where it comes back to the way it's come back for you.
And the way you did it, Vance, was very bold. I mean, you really drew a line in the sand. You took an axe and you whacked a line in the concrete and said, that's the old, and I'm getting on my Harley and I'm out of here. But for our listeners, don't be afraid to take a reflection in your life. Take time to reflect. Take time to question your decision-making criteria about your career path. Take time to reflect on the values that are making you make decisions. Are those the right values for today? What really does matter and mean something to you? How can you bring who you are on the inside out? And I'll bet, Vance, that if you looked back into your childhood, how you played, the roles that you played on your sports teams, the roles in your family and cul-de-sac and out in the farm and in the community and Boy Scouts and anything that you did, I'll bet that you were always the one who knew all the information and helped people with that information. And what happens in career is we tend to thematically replay that natural role that is so obvious and beautiful in childhood when we are free from any stressors, like, oh, we have to make a paycheck, or oh, we have to meet a status symbol, or oh, we have to have a certain title. When you're a child and an adolescent and you don't have a lot of pressures, if you look thematically at the ways that you occupied your time, and then you compare that to how you are occupying your time and occupation as an adult, when you are an adult who is doing occupation that feels really good and aligned, you can see those themes. And I'll bet if we did a little analysis, we could find a lot of similarity. It sounds like you've got a great future ahead of you, Vance.
Well, I certainly hope so. That's the intention. But, for the third time in the call, life is what happens to us as we're trying to implement our plan.
Yeah. Wear a parachute pack next time, okay?
Yeah, exactly. And that's also why I no longer ride Harleys. It was fun. I did it for 20 plus years. No accidents, no major issues. And, you're so right. I look back on that period, especially in the first 3 months, and I had folks in my industry, Julie, that were going, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And
How
I'm
could you
going,
leave it?
"I'm living. Like,
They
this
were
is
jealous, Vance.
amazing."
They were jealous.
And you hear these stories among men, late 40s, early 50s, maybe even mid 50s, and they're like, "I just want to get on a Harley and go," And I thought, well, maybe I'm 20 years too early, but I'm going to do that because I owe that to myself. I owe that to my late family members. And I just want to make sure that I understand deeply what is of utmost importance to me. And to your comment earlier, Julie, I had always associated in the solipsism of youth that having money in the bank equates to security, which equates to happiness. And
Right.
Some of the most miserable people I've ever met have more money than they know what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the happiest people I've met have literally nothing. And again, I've never met a stranger. So when I come into the building and there are homeless folks outside, I speak with them just the same as I do the guy who drives a Bentley and parks here in the building every day.
Mm-hmm.
There's no difference.
Stability is not money. Stability is knowing what your skills are, where they fit, and that they're in high demand.
Yeah. Well, Vance, hearing you again this morning, man, I know you, so I've heard your story. This isn't the first time, but there's a vitality about you.
Love it.
That you've got now that you've reached this place. And I feel like it was great for you to be able to, not many people don't, for a number of reasons, take the opportunity that you took. Take that opportunity to really rethink and to really have, as Julie put, a sabbatical, but a much more emotionally and physically and in many other ways fulfilling one. Yeah. I mean, this is a real exceptional story. I feel like our world would be a better place if everyone did this and everyone had a chance to revisit the kinds of things that you did. So from that perspective, I really want to thank you for coming on the show, for sharing this story, and for enlightening our listeners.
It's a wonderful career arc and a humanity arc. We got to see your human development beneath your career development. And I just can't thank you enough for allowing us to use your story as a frame for exposing how life events and personal growth and learning really do change the course of who we are and what we can be to the workplace and to others around us. Thank you.
Wow, Julie and Joel, I really, really appreciate that. I was recently asked publicly, why is it that you share so much of your personal? And my response was, because I'm in the business of personal. Investing can be taught, but navigating life experiences, complex financial planning, and so on, that's a whole different element. And I just can't thank you enough for the opportunity to share my story today.
Well, of course, it's going to be a much broader opportunity. Our podcast is available on iTunes, and we'll be putting it up there. And of course, we're happy to have you use it to help your own personal and professional optics, to have people understand a little more about you. We usually load our episodes within a week or two after when they occur. And then you and I are in a big networking group together. We'll be talking about it there. And so we'll be trying to make a little noise, Vance, because I think, what I felt was that we could use this opportunity not only for the podcast and for our listeners, but also for using you as a model for your transition and what happened. It's just been a great experience having you on the show.
Well, thank you both very, very much. I certainly appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, buddy, we will look forward to seeing you very soon. Julie has one more comment.
Vance, is there a website, a book, a URL, a social media handle? Give us plug yourself for us, Vance.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I am on Twitter at Vance Barse, but I think the most value that listeners can find is by going to vancebarse.com. They can read some of my professional background there on the homepage, and in particular on the top right on the news link, articles that I've published or in which I've been quoted, including Barron's, CNBC, Investment News, ThinkAdvisor, which is formerly Investment Advisor magazine.
Yeah.
It's all there. It's all free. And if there are any subjects that people would like me to write about or comment on, they can certainly email me, vance@vancebarse.com.
Wonderful. And then as a business, Vance, what kind of problems can you solve? What kind of clients would you be looking for? What would people call you for?
Clients typically have unusual fact patterns and a particular pain point. So they might own a business. They might own multiple pieces of real estate. They might own both. Commonly, they have charitable intent, or they might have a really high tax burden. And here's really good news for anyone listening that might have an interest in speaking with me. They don't have to end the relationship with their current advisor, meaning they don't have to move their investable assets to me. I have clients that retain me on a flat consulting basis to come in and look at what strategies have not been implemented thus far, and to very specifically outline how I can bring value by working alongside of their current planner, their CPA, and their estate planner, and those that have companies, maybe their CFO or the family board, family governance, and so on and so forth. Great question.
No doubt I would feel comfortable with you having my back financially if I had intricacies and complexities that were beyond what my stockbroker could handle. So for all the listeners out there, if you or a family member are part of a high net worth group who needs some additional eyes on your situation and some additional planning, please consider Vance.
Absolutely. And Vance, last question, is that picture of you on the bike still on your website?
Or the beard? I want to see the beard.
The photos with the long hair and beard are not publicly available. I'm actually considering drafting an article, and I already have a venue of distribution for it, to talk about the very things that we have embodied on the podcast today. So no, they're not out there. But if
we can Photoshop it.
Yeah, just joking, but I wanted to make sure we got that in there. I've seen it, and it's quite a story. So okay.
By the way, it's Vance Barse, BARSE.
BARSE, Vance Barse.
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. Okay, buddy. Well, listen, it's been so great having you. I know I'll see you soon, and we look forward to more contact with you.
Excellent. Julie, Joel, thank you so much, and many thanks to all the listeners.
Wonderful to have you, Vance.
All righty. Thank you.
Well, okay. I knew that Vance would be a great guest, and
he really was.
Lived up to his billing. You know, I was thinking as well that in that industry, very few people have his career arc, where they take that kind of a break and do what he did.
Right.
You were in financial services for a time.
Yeah.
You've got professional skills in that area. You know how buttoned up that is, and his description of where he started, looking at the Porsches and other cars and what he went through was just so evocative, and I think really for everybody. I mean, I think that's, as I said during the interview, I think that's a lesson and an experience that everyone should have. I took a break when I was young and moved from the Midwest to San Francisco and was involved in some other activities for a while. And so, I just think it's really important that he just happens to be such an articulate guy and so much fun that it was great to have him on our show.
Absolutely. I can see how he'd be a wonderful financial advising consultant because he has this kind of childlike curiosity about him, Joel. I mean, even just imagine him walking up to the group of Porsche drivers in La Jolla, just like, what's that?
Yeah.
And walking up to the homeless guy, what's going on with you, buddy? I can just see him getting in every single piece of paper, every single subcontractor that has anything to do with someone's complexities. And that's probably because he has that vivacious curiosity, that childlike thirst for knowing what's happening. That's the neuroscience degree coming in. How does it work? Like, what's going on? I can imagine that he's really good at asking the tough questions on complex financial planning matters.
That's very perceptive of you. I know Vance, and he is very much like that.
Yeah.
And so for all of you out there who think, nah, I can't do it, it can't happen, it wouldn't work.
He can do it.
Well, you've heard it. It did work. He went to probably the most radical kind of sabbatical anybody can take, and now he's back with 2 children doing very well, etc. And that's really the meaning of Julie and I wanting to have Vance on the show today, was to help a lot of our young professionals realize that it's okay to do this. In the modern world, things are so fast-paced, and the whole environment of work is changing so rapidly that we oftentimes feel like we cannot get off the train for a minute. But that's not true. You can, and sometimes when you get out at the next stop, it's going to be better.
Absolutely. And if you need a sabbatical, take a sabbatical. It's mandatory at some levels on Wall Street executives. It's mandatory for a lot of pastors. And even vacation in financial services is mandatory. You may not be forced to take a sabbatical if you're not at the higher levels, but it's mandatory to take a few weeks off. You have to take your vacation. And I try to take the month of August very light. It's good to have a traffic pattern that can work with you to rest and recuperate and self-reflect and grow out of that stronger. And so I actually have a lot of people coming to me worried about what a sabbatical or 3 months off or a trip around Europe is going to look like if they take it. And I say take it. There are more gaps in employment that are healthy than there are ones that are unhealthy.
And a lot of the executives I work with who are very stressed out do not. They do not utilize that at all. I've just come back from Europe, and
they should.
I don't know if you know this, all of our listeners have been in Europe. 5 weeks of vacation are mandatory for every worker in the European Union.
Yeah.
5 weeks of vacation, and we were talking about it with many people in France, and it's a national right, and it's a renewal. And so, this having Vance on the show is an example of that. And if we all had to ask, for you to all put your hands up, if you've taken 3 months or more as a sabbatical, we might find that not enough hands have gone up.
Oh, I think a lot of hands have been saying, we want that. I can hear all of our American HR people right now saying, we should have that. I don't know why we don't.
That's very well said, Julie. Okay, well, it's been fun, and we'll be back soon with another guest and more callers on CareerLab.
Like, listen, and subscribe to the CareerLab podcast. Also find us on the web at careerlabnow.com.